You've been told a story about money your entire life, and it's almost certainly wrong. Not wrong in the small details, wrong at the root. Here's the actual claim. For centuries, economists taught that before money existed, humans bartered, swapped a chicken for a sack of grain, argued over the exchange rate of a cow. Then, supposedly, money arrived to solve that mess. Anthropologists have spent decades looking for a society that actually worked that way. They haven't found one. So if the story we were taught isn't how money actually began, what really happened? And more importantly, how did we go from that murky origin point to a system where a government can print itself richer overnight and hollow out your savings without you ever agreeing to it? We're going to trace this from the very beginning. Coins struck by an actual king, paper currency invented centuries before the West even considered it. A single afternoon in 1971 that changed what money means permanently. By the end, you'll understand exactly why the money in your pocket is worth anything at all, and exactly how fragile that reason really is. Let's start with the story you were taught, because you need to understand it before we take it apart. Adam Smith, 1776, The Wealth of Nations. Smith argued that early humans lived with a basic problem. I have wheat, you have shoes, but you don't want wheat today. Trade breaks down. So, the story goes, money was invented to fix it. For over 200 years, this was simply accepted. Economics textbooks still open with some version of it. Here's the problem. Anthropologists actually went looking for the society this describes, a pure barter economy, no money, no credit, just direct trade, and found nothing. Cambridge anthropologist Caroline Humphrey put it directly, no example of a barter economy, pure and simple, has ever been described in any ethnography, not one. Not a small correction, a complete absence of evidence for the foundational story of economics. So what actually happened before coins existed? The alternative case, made most forcefully by anthropologist David Graeber, is that credit and debt came first. Long before anyone was trading goods directly, people were tracking obligations. Who owed what to whom, inside families, inside communities. That part is genuinely contested among historians. Some economists push back hard on Graeber's version too, but on one point, there's real agreement. The tidy textbook story, barter first, money second, isn't history. It's a story that got told so often it started sounding like one. And if the official version of money's origin is already wrong, you have to wonder what else about money you've simply accepted without ever checking. Now let's go to something we can actually date, something real, Western Turkey. The kingdom of Lydia, somewhere around 600 BC, a Lydian king, most likely Alyats, father of the legendary Croesus, does something nobody has documented doing before him. He takes lumps of electrum, a natural alloy of gold and silver pulled straight from a local river, and stamps them with an official seal, not just a piece of valuable metal anymore. A piece of metal the state has personally guaranteed. That single act, the stamp, is the actual birth of coinage as we understand it. Before it, you had to weigh and assess metal every single time you traded. After it, the king's seal did that work for you. Alyata's son, Croesus, takes it even further. He becomes the first ruler in history to issue pure gold and pure silver coins separately, developing a refining process precise enough to guarantee consistent purity across every coin struck. Croesus becomes so wealthy from this that rich as Croesus is still a phrase in English today, 26 centuries later. Legend even ties his fortune to King Midas. The same river, the same gold, mythologized generations before Croesus ever touched it. So now money has a face, a stamp, a guarantee from a king. But coinage has one obvious weakness: it's heavy. And on the other side of the world, one civilization was about to solve that problem in a way nobody in the West would even attempt for another 500 years. China, the Song dynasty, around 1024 AD. Merchants in Sichuan province have a real logistics problem. Bronze coins are heavy, awkward to transport over long distances, and copper for making them is running short as trade expands. Their solution, a group of financial firms starts issuing paper receipts, called jiaozi, in exchange for deposits of coin, not government-backed, not official currency yet, just a private workaround for merchants tired of hauling sacks of metal across the country. It works. It works so well the government eventually takes over the system entirely. This is the actual invention of paper money, not a metaphor, not a precursor, the real thing. Roughly 6 centuries before Sweden becomes the first country in Europe to attempt anything similar. But here's the part of the story that almost never gets told alongside the celebration of this innovation. The Song system held its value reasonably well for decades. Then later dynasties, the Jin and especially the Mongol Yuan, took the same tool and used it very differently. The Yuan dynasty banned coinage outright and relied on paper money exclusively. Between 1260 and 1309 alone, that paper currency lost half its value. Paper money didn't just get invented in China, its entire life cycle, invention, initial success, and eventual collapse through overissuance, played out there first, centuries before anyone in the West would repeat the exact same mistake. China had discovered something almost nobody wanted to admit yet: paper only holds value as long as the people issuing it show restraint. Restraint that, 600 years later, an American president would abandon in a single televised address. Let's jump forward. July 1944, Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. 44 nations, fresh out of a war that had shattered the global economy twice in one generation, meet to build something new. The agreement: the US dollar gets pegged to gold at exactly $35 an ounce. Every other major currency in the world gets pegged to the dollar. Japan's currency locks to the dollar at 360 yen. Britain's locks at its own fixed rate. The entire post-war global economy runs through one single promise: that any dollar anywhere in the world can be exchanged for real physical gold at that fixed $35 rate. For over 2 decades, this actually works. The system becomes fully functional by 1958, and the world settles into a stability nobody alive had experienced in their adult lifetime. But there's a structural problem buried inside that promise, and it starts showing cracks almost immediately. The US keeps spending abroad: foreign aid, military bases, overseas investment. Dollars pile up in foreign hands faster than America's actual gold reserves can back them. By the 1960s, more dollars exist around the world than the US has gold to redeem. Kennedy tries to fix it, Johnson tries to fix it, neither succeeds. Foreign governments start noticing the math doesn't work, and start doing something that should terrify anyone holding dollars. They start actually asking for their gold. August 13th, 1971, Camp David. Nixon calls in his top economic advisors, Treasury Secretary John Connally, Fed Chairman Arthur Burns, and a young official named Paul Volcker, who would later run the Federal Reserve himself. 2 days of closed-door meetings. On the evening of August 15th, Nixon goes on national television. The announcement: the United States is suspending the convertibility of dollars into gold. Foreign governments can no longer trade their dollars for America's gold reserves. Not temporarily reformed, not renegotiated, just closed. Nixon frames it as protecting Americans from currency speculators. Now, who gains from these crises, he asks the country? Not the working man, not the investor, not the real producers of wealth. What he doesn't frame it as: the effective end of every currency on earth being tied to a physical, finite commodity. The gold window that had anchored international money since Bretton Woods, since, in some form, 1821, closes in a single evening and never reopens. From that moment forward, the dollar isn't a claim on anything physical anymore. It's not backed by gold, it's not backed by silver, it's backed by exactly one thing: trust that the United States government will manage it responsibly, which raises the only question that actually matters from here forward. What happens to money, and to the people holding it, when that trust breaks? Here's the part almost nobody explains clearly, so let's be precise about it. The money you use today is called fiat currency. Currency with no physical backing at all. Its entire value exists because a government declares it legal tender, and because enough people agree to keep accepting it. That's not a flaw hidden in the system. It's the entire design, on purpose, since 1971. And here's the detail that actually surprises most people. Central banks barely print most of the money in circulation. Most money is created electronically the moment a bank issues a loan. When you pay that loan back, the money effectively disappears again. Deleted, not stored somewhere. Central banks manage this entire system using a small number of tools: interest rates, reserve requirements. The Federal Reserve specifically targets 2% inflation a year, not 0, 2% on purpose, as the number they believe keeps the system stable without letting it run away. Both of these things are true at once. This system is remarkably flexible. It let governments respond to the 2008 crisis and COVID in ways a gold-backed system never could have allowed, and that exact same flexibility is the entire mechanism by which a government can quietly make your savings worth less without passing a single law that mentions your bank account by name. Most of the time, this balance holds. Central banks manage it carefully enough that you never notice the mechanism running underneath your daily life. But when that management fails, when a government forgets the one rule this entire system depends on, the results aren't subtle at all. Germany, 1923. The Weimar Republic owes massive war reparations under the Treaty of Versailles. It can't pay through taxation, so it starts printing money instead. The mechanism turns vicious almost immediately. More money printed, the currency's value collapses further, which pushes the government to print even more just to cover the same bills. By the peak of the crisis, Germans are using wheelbarrows to carry enough banknotes to buy bread. When the government finally stabilizes the currency in November 1923, the exchange rate is 1 trillion old marks to a single new one. That's not a metaphor, 1 trillion to 1. Now fast forward to Zimbabwe, 2008. Same mechanism, different country. The government prints to cover its own spending, with no regard for the consequences. By January 2009, a single banknote is issued for 100 trillion Zimbabwean dollars, worth, on the black market, about 230 euros. 100 trillion on a single piece of paper, barely enough for groceries. Here's what connects both of these collapses. and it's not really about the printing itself. Research into hyperinflation across more than 50 recorded cases found something specific. It doesn't happen because of ordinary monetary policy or a politician chasing an election. It happens when a state has completely lost control of its tax base, usually during war or total economic collapse. In other words, hyperinflation isn't really a currency problem, it's what a currency problem looks like after trust in the government behind it has already broken completely. The Song dynasty discovered this exact lesson 1,000 years earlier, with paper money nobody in Europe had even conceived of yet. Weimar and Zimbabwe just proved the lesson still holds on a modern scale with modern stakes. So, if trust is really the entire foundation this whole system rests on, where does that actually leave you? Here's where all of this actually lands. The chicken in your fridge, the rent you pay, the number sitting in your bank account, none of it is backed by gold anymore. None of it has been since a single televised address in August 1971. It's backed by trust. Trust that a central bank will hit its 2% target instead of 20%. Trust that a government won't do what Weimar did, what Zimbabwe did, what the Yuan dynasty did exactly the same way, 1,000 years earlier, with a technology their own dynasty had invented. Both of these things are true at once. This system has delivered more stability, more growth, and more flexibility to respond to crises than the gold standard ever managed across its entire history, and it works by asking you to trust an institution you will never meet, making decisions about your money you will never get to vote on directly. That's not a conspiracy, it's not even hidden, it's just rarely explained this plainly. The barter story you were taught was never really history, it was a convenient explanation. The real history, kings stamping metal, merchants inventing paper, a president closing a gold window on a Sunday night, is stranger and far more human than the neat version ever let on. I'm not going to tell you whether this system holds or eventually breaks the way Weimar's did or Zimbabwe's did. Nobody serious can promise you that with certainty. But now you understand exactly what you're holding every time you open your wallet. It was never really about the paper. If this hits you, then why you're not joining to this channel?